Imagine a storm that never stops, a town trapped beneath endless rain, where the very water seems to carry the whispers of the lost. Tonight's tale uncovers the horrifying secrets of a small town that cannot escape the storm, and the terror that comes with it. The town of Blackwater had always been known for its peaceful isolation. Nestled in a quiet valley, it was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where life moved at its own gentle pace. But that all changed when the storm came. It started as a typical summer rain, just a few days of light showers. But then, the rain didn't stop. It lingered, relentless, turning into a constant downpour, drenching the town without mercy. The townsfolk tried to continue with their lives, assuming it would pass, but it didn't. The storm became a permanent presence, day after day, week after week, as if the skies themselves were trapped in an endless cycle. At first, the rain didn't seem so ominous, but as the floodwaters began to rise, something strange began to happen. People started to disappear. At first, it was only one or two, a hiker who went missing in the woods, a farmer who never returned to his flooded fields. But soon, it became clear that something was wrong. There were no bodies, no signs of struggle, just empty spaces where people had once been. No one knew why, but every morning someone else was gone. As the days blurred together, strange creatures began to emerge from the rising floodwaters. They weren't like anything anyone had seen before. Muted figures, twisted by the rain, slithered from the depths of the overflowing rivers. They had pale, translucent skin, hollow eyes, and movements that were unnaturally quick. They would vanish back into the waters as soon as they were noticed, leaving behind nothing but a chill in the air. Megan, a local school teacher, had stayed behind, determined to keep some sense of normalcy in the town. But it wasn't long before she heard the first whisper. It came during one of the rare quiet moments, when the storm calmed for just a few hours, and Megan was sitting alone in her home. The sound was soft at first, like the wind, but when it called her name, her blood froze. "Megan, Megan, come closer." She rushed outside, searching through the heavy fog that clung to the streets, but there was no one there, no one but the endless rain. She shook her head, telling herself it was just the wind. But the voice continued, always calling her name, always just out of reach. That night, the whispers grew louder. They came from everywhere, beneath the floors, behind the walls, from the river that now lapped against the town's borders. And they were no longer just calling her name. The whispers spoke of the missing. "We are here, we are waiting. You will join us soon." Megan's mind began to unravel. The missing people were not just lost. They were trapped in the storm, bound to it, their souls absorbed by the relentless rain. And the creatures that roamed the streets were not just beasts. They were the corrupted remnants of those who had vanished, twisted by the storm into something far worse. Desperate to escape, Megan joined a group of survivors who had gathered in the town's church, hoping for shelter and safety. But as the storm continued to rage outside, their hope faded. One by one, the whispers grew more insistent. People began to disappear in the night, drawn into the flooded streets by the voices of the lost. Megan fought to hold on to her sanity, but each day that passed brought more horrors. The creatures grew bolder, the whispers more frantic. There was no way out. The storm had claimed the town, and with it the souls of its people. On the 7th week, the storm reached its peak. The town's buildings began to crumble under the weight of the flood. The streets turned to rivers of blackened water, and the creatures emerged from the depths in swarms. The survivors realized the truth. They weren't trapped asterisk in asterisk a storm. They were trapped asterisk inside asterisk the storm. The storm was a prison, a twisted dimension that consumed the souls of anyone who entered. Megan, heartbroken and broken in spirit, stood at the edge of the flood, looking out at the vast, endless rain. The whispers in her ears were no longer words. They were cries, desperate and sorrowful, from those who had fallen before her. And the storm, it was alive. As the water reached her ankles, she heard one last whisper, "Join us, Megan. You belong to us now." And with that, she felt herself pulled into the flood, her body sinking beneath the weight of the water, her soul merging with the storm. The cycle would continue, trapping others in its endless downpour. The town of Blackwater, consumed by the storm, would never escape. It would haunt the world forever. What if the rain you prayed for wasn't a blessing but a curse? Tonight's tale unravels the dark secret behind an ancient rainmaker who promises salvation, only to unleash horrors beyond imagination. Can anyone survive the storm that brings more than just water? The village of Eldermist had been suffering for years. The crops had withered, the rivers had dried, and the sun burned relentlessly over the land. Desperation grew with each passing day, and whispers of an ancient ritual spread among the villagers. A ritual that could summon rain from the heavens. The Rainmaker, a mysterious figure known only by legend, said to have the power to bring water when all hope was lost. Some believed it was a myth. Others were more than willing to trust in the tales if it meant salvation. The village elders, grasping at the last strands of hope, decided to summon the Rainmaker. On the day of the ritual, the villagers gathered in the town square, their faces gaunt with hunger and thirst. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a lone figure appeared on the outskirts of the village. Cloaked in dark robes, with a face hidden beneath a hood, the Rainmaker approached, his steps silent, as the world around him seemed to hold its breath. "Are you prepared to pay the price?" the Rainmaker asked, his voice like a whisper on the wind. The elders nodded, their faces grim. The cost was known, a price that was steep, but one they were willing to pay. They agreed, not understanding the true meaning of the price until it was far too late. With a single word, the Rainmaker raised his arms, and the heavens responded. Rain began to fall, first in small, gentle droplets, but soon it became a torrential downpour, soaking the village to its core. The villagers cheered, believing their suffering was over. But as the rain continued to pour, something began to change. The water was not just water. By the third night of the rain, the first signs of something wrong began to appear. The villagers heard strange noises in the distance, soft, dragging footsteps, like something heavy being pulled through the mud. The sound grew closer, echoing through the streets, and the villagers' joy turned to dread. From the flooded graves of the nearby cemetery, the dead began to rise. Their bodies, bloated and dripping with water, stumbled out of the earth. Their eyes were wide and white, like pools of water reflecting the storm. They were not alive, but they were not dead either. Their flesh was pale, bloated, and covered in mildew, their mouths open in a silent scream. They moved with unnatural speed, their once human forms twisted and grotesque. Their wet eyes glistened with hunger as they shuffled toward the living. The first victim was a young woman named Clara. She had been standing by the well, watching the rain fall, when the corpse of her mother rose from the ground. Her mother's face was no longer her own. It was a twisted mockery of the woman Clara had known. The corpse grabbed her, dragging her into the muddy streets as Clara screamed, her cries swallowed by the rain. The villagers panicked as more and more of the dead emerged from the soaked earth, their numbers growing with every passing hour. The rain, once a blessing, was now a nightmare. The curse had taken root. The rain didn't just bring water, it revived the dead, turning them into malevolent, monstrous creatures that hungered for the living. The Rainmaker's laughter echoed in the night, low and guttural, carried by the storm. He had kept his promise. The rain had come, but it had come with a cost no one had anticipated. The villagers, now trapped in their own flooded town, were forced to fight back against their loved ones, people they had once shared meals and memories with, now soulless, rain-soaked abominations they had once known, now twisted into hungry monsters by the curse of the rain. Among the survivors was Jonas, a blacksmith who had lost his wife and son to the dead. With a group of remaining villagers, he barricaded himself in the town's church, hoping it would protect them. But the dead were relentless, scratching at the walls, their hollow eyes gazing in from the windows. The rain continued to fall, and as it did, more bodies emerged from the earth, adding to the relentless onslaught. Jonas, his body exhausted and his spirit broken, confronted the Rainmaker one final time. He found the figure standing at the edge of the village, watching as the storm consumed everything. "You promised us salvation," Jonas shouted, his voice cracking with anger and grief. The Rainmaker turned, his face now visible beneath the hood, a face that was nothing but a shadow of a man. "I gave you rain," he replied, his voice echoing with an unnatural calm. "But the cost was not just water, it was life. And now those you mourn shall return, but they will never be the same." With that, the rainmaker disappeared into the storm, leaving Jonas standing alone as the rain continued to fall. The villagers had no choice but to fight, knowing they would never be free. The storm would never stop, and with each drop, the curse would grow stronger. The dead would rise again, and the cycle of horror would continue, all because of the rainmaker's promise. What if a flood didn't just drown the land, but also the past? Tonight's tale reveals the haunting truth behind a submerged town, where the spirits of its drowned residents now seek vengeance. Can a group of friends survive the dark history beneath the waters? The heavy rain had been falling for days. The sky was dark with thick rolling clouds, and the world outside was a blur of water. But for Mark, Sarah, Jenny, and Dean, it was the perfect opportunity for an adventure. They had heard rumors about an old forest, one that had been partially flooded after a torrential downpour years ago. The locals said strange things happened there: ghosts, eerie whispers, the lost cries of the past. But to the group of friends, it was just another thrilling mystery to unravel. Ignoring the warnings of the townspeople, they piled into Mark's truck and headed for the forest. They arrived just as the rain began to intensify, but their excitement pushed aside any hesitation. The forest was eerily quiet. The trees towered over them like dark sentinels, their branches heavy with rainwater. The ground beneath their feet was slick, the once solid earth now a mix of mud and shallow pools. The further they ventured, the deeper the water became. The trees stood like skeletons, their trunks half submerged in dark, murky water. It wasn't long before they noticed something strange. A patch of land just beyond the water's edge, where the outlines of old buildings could be seen. The group approached cautiously, realizing they were looking at an abandoned town, drowned and forgotten. The buildings, though weathered by time and water, still stood. Their windows were dark and shattered. The town was eerily quiet, except for the soft, constant sound of the rain falling heavily onto the water below. But as the group explored the ruins, they began to feel an oppressive presence, something watching them from the shadows of the flooded buildings. "What is this place?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling as she looked around at the decaying structures. Dean, who had always been the skeptic of the group, scoffed. "It's just an old town that got flooded, nothing to worry about." But Jenny, the more sensitive one, had already noticed something odd. The air felt thick, heavy, like it was pressing in on them, and the water, there was something wrong about it. It didn't look like ordinary rainwater. It was darker, murkier, as if it had been tainted by something far more sinister. They ventured deeper into the town, wading through the knee-high water that seeped into the cracks of the old buildings. Mark, who had been leading the way, stopped. Suddenly, his eyes widened in shock. "Guys, look at this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. There in the middle of the town square stood a large, crumbling fountain. But it wasn't just water that spilled from its broken spout. The water in the fountain was swirling, moving unnaturally, almost as if something beneath the surface was alive. As they approached, the water began to rise, swirling violently, and with it something emerged. A figure, drenched, dripping with water, rose from the depths of the fountain. Its face was pale, its features distorted, and its eyes were empty, like hollow pits. It reached out toward them with a slow, jerky motion, its hands like clawed appendages. And then another figure appeared, and then another, and another. Figures that had been hidden beneath the murky waters, drowned long ago, their souls trapped in the endless cycle of death. The friends stumbled backward, fear rising in their throats as they realized the truth. The town had been flooded not by nature, but by something darker, something that had taken the lives of its inhabitants and buried them beneath the water, trapping their spirits in the ruins. "Run!" Sarah screamed, but the spirits were already closing in. Their eyes were no longer empty. Now they were filled with hunger, an insatiable thirst for the living. The group turned and bolted, splashing through the waist-deep water, but the spirits were fast. Their bodies slick and wet, gliding through the water like shadows. Every direction they turned seemed to lead them deeper into the town, the flooded streets twisting into an endless maze. The spirits whispered, their voices rising above the storm, a mournful sound that chilled their bones. As they ran, they stumbled upon the town's old church, its bell tower now half submerged in water. Without thinking, they pushed open the heavy doors and rushed inside. The church was dark and cold, the air thick with a sense of dread. As they caught their breath, Mark noticed something carved into the wooden beams above the altar. It was an inscription, faded by time but still legible. Asterisk, the water never stops. The dead never leave. To break the curse, the living must die. It was then they realized the town had been cursed long before the flood. The spirits weren't just trapped, they were waiting for the living to come, so they could drag them under. Just as they had been dragged under all those years ago. Suddenly, the doors slammed shut with a deafening crash. The friends spun around to see the spirits closing in, their wet, haunting faces twisted with fury. The water had risen too high, flooding the church, and the spirits were coming for them. With nowhere left to run, they turned to face the spirits. In a final, desperate attempt to survive, Jenny screamed, "We need to break the curse. We have to find the source." But the spirits were already upon them, their cold hands reaching for their throats, dragging them into the rising water. The last thing Mark saw, before the water swallowed him whole, was the eyes of the drowned, empty, dark, and filled with endless hunger. And as the water closed over their heads, the friends knew the truth. The curse of the drowned town would never end. They would join the spirits of the past, trapped beneath the water for eternity.